Okay, so let's try a bit of a thought experiment to start things off today. When you picture power, like real world-altering power, what image actually comes to mind?
Right. I mean, most people go straight to the president in the Oval Office.
Yeah, or the prime minister at 10 Downing Street.
Or maybe some tech billionaire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if that's just, wrong? What if true power doesn't just cross borders or bureaucracies, but actually crosses above governments entirely?
That is the core of what we're looking at today.
Yeah, we are unpacking a concept from a recent deep dive into the Julian Dorey transcripts that frankly makes standard political intrigue look like child's play. We are talking about the supra-government.
It's a term attributed to Tucker Carlson in the source material we're analyzing, and it describes this incredibly specific structure. It's this idea that the most visible, powerful figures are actually just working for an even smaller, completely undecided group of elites.
An elite group with zero allegiance to any flag or nation. And normally when we talk about this stuff, it stays really abstract. It feels like spy fiction. But today, we're going to map this out using perhaps the darkest, most disturbingly detailed case study out there.
The network surrounding Jeffrey Epstein.
Right. And just to set our mission for you listening right now, we are not here to rehash tabloid gossip.
No, we don't care who took a vacation on the island.
Exactly. We are looking at the machinery of it all, the intelligence agencies, the private defense contractors, and the high finance figures.
Because the evidence in these documents suggests it was an operation, a state-sponsored intelligence operation.
From day one. And to actually understand it, you can't start with Jeffrey Epstein.
No, you really can't. You have to go back an entire generation to look at the archetype for this kind of supra-government operative. You have to look at Robert Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell's father.
Right. Who is so much more than a British media tycoon. If you trace his trajectory, like starting from when he leaves Europe in 1939, it reads like a training manual for how to operate above the state.
He builds this massive media empire, but it's the nature of his business dealings that the source material really zeroes in on. There's a quote from the research that just stuck with me.
What about the board seats?
Yeah. It describes the global power elite as incredibly incestuous. It says these companies and board seats were passed around a tiny handful of people, quote, like used condoms.
It is a totally gross image, but it's completely accurate. And look at what they were actually trading. It wasn't shoe factories or car plants.
No, it was industries that influence human thought.
Exactly. We're talking peer-reviewed scientific journals, K-12 textbooks, major news outlets, the same tiny group swapping control of the world's information architecture.
Which gives them narrative control. But here's the thing that always blows my mind about Robert Maxwell. The guy was a massive crook.
Oh, undeniably.
Right? I mean, he died in 1991 under insanely suspicious circumstances, falling off his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. And this was right in the middle of a massive scandal. He had essentially raided his own company's pension funds for something like £400 million.
He absolutely robbed his own employees blind.
So usually when a fraudster of that magnitude dies, they're buried in disgrace. Quiet service, family only. But Maxwell, he was buried on the Mount of Olives in Israel.
Which is an incredibly specific and rare honor. That location is reserved for the absolute highest tier. High rabbis, national heroes, leaders of the state.
And he didn't just get a plot there. He got a full-blown state funeral.
Right.
The Prime Minister of Israel attended. The head of the opposition attended. Former heads of intelligence were there.
And that is the paradox we're talking about. You don't get a Mount of Olives send-off for stealing pensions. You get that for service to the state.
Because it's an open secret now that Maxwell was a triple agent.
Working with MI6, the KGB, and the Mossad simultaneously.
Which just sounds impossible during the Cold War. How do you balance the British, the Russians, and the Israelis?
You do it by working for that layer above them, the supra-government. You become the ultimate conduit for information that everyone needs. And this establishes the precedent. The family business wasn't publishing, it was intelligence gathering.
Which bridges us perfectly to Epstein. Because the standard mainstream narrative is that Epstein was this solitary math whiz who made $1 billion and then just developed these horrific habits.
But the timeline doesn't support that at all. The math doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. He leaves Bear Stearns around 1981. And Bear Stearns is an important context here.
Very important. It was historically viewed as an outsider bank.
Yeah, much more pro-Zionist compared to the traditional Westby establishment on Wall Street at the time. So he leaves, sets up his own shop, and claims he only takes clients with $1 billion or more.
Which is fantastic marketing. But where did that seed money actually come from?
Well, the source points to his travel patterns. Because immediately after leaving Bear Stearns, his movements aligned perfectly with the Al-Yama arms deal.
And we should probably explain what Al-Yamama was for anyone who isn't familiar.
Right, so it was basically the biggest arms deal in British history. The UK selling massive amounts of fighter jets and military hardware to Saudi Arabia in the 80s. But it was structured as a barter system.
The Saudis paid in oil.
Exactly. And the money involved was astronomical. Tens of billions of pounds, which required these massive off-book slush funds to handle kickbacks, bribes, and totally unacknowledged operational costs.
And suddenly you have Jeffrey Epstein, this supposed financial consultant, showing up right in the middle of it.
Carrying fake passports.
Right. Why does a legitimate money manager need multiple fake passports?
It doesn't. Not unless he's moving funds that aren't supposed to be tracked.
The prevailing theory from intelligence analysts in our source material is that Epstein was brought in specifically as a fixer.
A Mossad asset on the ground.
Exactly. The financial wizard who could quietly move these black budget pots of money between global jurisdictions. And when you handle that kind of money, you get hooks into people. That's how he became a protected asset.
Okay, but Al-Yamama was a UK-Saudi deal. Epstein is an American operating out of New York and Palm Beach. If he's running around doing this on U.S. soil, the CIA has to know.
They absolutely knew. And this is where the source gets into what they call the unholy alliance.
Right, because people tend to think the CIA and the Mossad are just best friends who share everything.
They aren't. They're often fierce competitors.
Right.
But they are pragmatic. They trade leverage.
So the CIA figures out Epstein is running compromise and blackmail networks in America.
And instead of shutting him down, which is what they legally should have done, they make a deal with the devil.
They realize he's too useful to put in jail.
Exactly. The theory is the CIA said, look, you let us peek at the intel you're gathering on these foreign dignitaries and scientists, and we will look the other way. We won't raid your house.
Which perfectly explains his total impunity for decades. Why he always seemed to have a get-out-of-jail-free card.
It's the only logical explanation for how he operated so openly.
Now, speaking of raiding houses, we have to talk about the physical infrastructure of his properties. Because a lot of this sounds like conspiracy theory until you read the actual recently revealed emails.
The 2016 emails regarding his Manhattan townhouse.
Yeah, this is the smoking gun for the state-sponsored argument. In 2016, Epstein is already a registered sex offender. He is completely radioactive.
No reputable security firm in America would touch him.
Right. But these emails detail the installation of a massive high-tech security system at the New York property, the one actively being used to house young women.
And the players involved in these emails are just staggering. They identify a guy named Rafi, who is linked to Israeli security services.
And it explicitly mentions coordination with the team of Ehud Barak.
Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel.
The former prime minister. And before that, a special forces commando. The most decorated soldier in their history.
Why is a foreign head of state personally involved in the security wiring of a convicted sex offender's front door?
It's insane. And the infrastructure they were installing was heavily customized. The emails talk about alarms, sensors, and remote neutralization capabilities.
Remote neutralization, meaning they could control the environment from the outside.
Disable the cameras.
Yeah.
Lock the doors. Turn off the alarms from a completely different country.
And Epstein's direct response in that email chain, he literally writes, quote, I do not mind holes in the walls.
I do not mind holes in the walls.
That is not a guy worried about his drywall. That is an intelligence asset acknowledging that his handlers need to hardwire their surveillance gear into his facility.
It validates everything. It wasn't a private home. It was a honey trap. And you have foreign intelligence essentially acting as the slither in the building.
Let's stick with that infrastructure for a second because the tech inside the house was just as baffling as the security outside.
Oh, you mean the butler's testimony?
Yes. Alfredo, the butler, from the 2009 FBI sting tape.
He describes this central command room in the house. Something like 30 screens on the wall. Hidden pin cams everywhere. Book cams.
And the computer itself.
Yeah.
Alfredo testified that the main computer was so powerful it required a custom water radiator cooling system.
Which, if you know anything about tech in the mid-2000s, you don't need water cooling for a standard desktop, unless you are rendering Pixar movies or running a massive server farm.
Or rapidly downloading industrial scales of data.
Terabytes of high-definition video files.
Exactly. It was a data collection hub. And that obsession with data and tech leads to one of the strangest meetings in his logbooks.
July 2011.
Epstein meets with Regina Dugan.
And for context, Regina Dugan at that time was the sitting head of DARPA.
The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the the bleeding edge of U.S. military technology.
Right. So ask yourself, why is the head of the military's top research wing taking a private meeting with a known convicted sex offender?
It strongly implies his value to the supergovernment wasn't just the blackmail photos, it was the surveillance technology itself.
He was bridging the underworld of human trafficking with the upper tier of defense research.
And the way he gathered that intelligence, the source material makes a really fascinating comparison to Bill Belichick.
The football coach.
Yeah, because Epstein didn't just traffic these women for parties, he studied his targets like a coach studies game tape.
Right. He demanded these intensely detailed reports from the victims. If he sent a girl to meet a powerful politician or a tech CEO, he would debrief her immediately afterwards.
Even if nothing sexual happened. Actually, especially if nothing sexual happened.
He wanted to know what they drank, what made them laugh,
Yeah.
what their insecurities were.
The source calls it mobily trafficking. He was turning these women into human listening devices to build psychological profiles on the world's power players.
Which is just textbook intelligence work.
Pure espionage.
And the circle of people involved in this, or at least adjacent to it, is so incredibly tight. We talked about it being incestuous earlier, and you really see that with the Terramar Project.
Ghislaine Maxwell's ocean conservation nonprofit.
Yeah. Sounds totally benign, right? Save the oceans.
Yeah.
But then you look at who was involved.
You have to look at Howard Lutnik.
The CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald.
Right. A huge figure in high finance and widely known as a 9/11 survivor.
Right. He was taking his kid to kindergarten that morning, which is why he survived while hundreds of his employees died in the towers.
It's a massive tragedy. But look at the super government overlaps here. Lutnik lived right next door to Jeffrey Epstein for 14 years.
11 East 71st Street. They literally shared a wall.
Shared a wall with the most prolific trafficker and intelligence asset in modern history. And Lutnik's sister, Edie Lutnik, was a founding citizen of Terramar.
The connections just never stop. The research actually points out this really specific video clip of Howard Lutnik talking with Donald Trump years later.
Oh, the nervous laughter video.
Yes. They're discussing 9/11 and his survival, and there's this palpable nervous energy in the room. The researcher highlights it as a tell. Like whenever this tiny group of elites skirts too close to their deep political connections, you see this physical discomfort.
It's like that old George Carlin joke. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
Except the source corrects Carlin on that. It's not a big club. It's an incredibly small club.
And if you aren't in it, you are either a target or a resource.
So let's zoom out for a second. We've got the intelligence agencies, the surveillance tech, the massive slush funds. What does this mean for our actual political system today?
Well, if you look at how the Epstein files are used right now, it's entirely partisan.
Yeah, Democrats use it to hammer Trump. Republicans use it to hammer the Clintons.
And that surface-level bickering is exactly what this super government relies on to survive. The documents argue this is fundamentally a bipartisan cover-up.
It has to be. Every administration for the last 20 to 30 years has kept a lid on this.
Because of how privatized intelligence has become, it's the revolving door.
Right. Explain how that works in this context.
You have high-level intelligence officers leaving the CIA or the NSA on a Friday, and on Monday, they start a new job at a private contractor like Lockheed Martin or some private intel firm.
And the second they go private, the rules change.
Completely. FOIA requests no longer apply. Congressional oversight basically vanishes. Salary caps are gone.
They enter a black hole of corporate secrecy where they can do the dirty work the government legally can't do itself.
Exactly. Blackmail, domestic surveillance, entrapment. The government outsources it to the supra-government network.
So exposing the Epstein network fully wouldn't just ruin a few politicians. It would expose the entire mechanism the intelligence community uses to bypass the U.S. Constitution.
Which is why true transparency is viewed as an existential threat to the establishment itself.
Which makes Donald Trump's position on this really complicated.
Very, because he's the first one to actually release some of these files and talk about it openly.
But he also has a very long, very documented, friendly history with Epstein.
Right. It's essentially a game of chicken at the highest level. You release just enough information to damage your political opponents, but not enough to burn the whole house down.
Because you live in the house too.
Precisely.
Man. Okay, before we wrap this up, we promised a real deep dive into all the source material. And we have to touch on the absolute darkest part of this data.
The fringe allegations.
Yeah. And I want to be careful here, but we can't ignore what is actually in the documents. We're talking about the specific keywords found in the emails and witness accounts.
References that are incredibly difficult to even process.
Keywords linked to cult-related rituals. Extreme exploitation.
Even references to cannibalism.
Right. Now, whether that means literal cannibalism or if it's some sort of sick role-play code, we don't know.
But the source material makes a really critical analytical point about why that depravity exists in the first place.
It serves a specific structural function.
It is the ultimate collateral.
Yeah. If you get someone on a hidden camera violating the absolute most basic, fundamental taboos of human existence,
You own them forever. They will never, ever flip on you.
they will do whatever the supra-government tells them to do, without question.
And that reality brings us to the final and honestly most terrifying question of this whole investigation.
The tapes.
We know the infrastructure existed.
We know about the radiator-cooled computer, the 30 screens, the remote-controlled cameras in the walls.
We know he was downloading terabytes of footage. But when the FBI raided the properties...
The master drives were never found. We've never seen the tapes.
If this was a highly compartmentalized intelligence operation, and all the evidence says it was, then that data didn't just disappear when Jeffrey Epstein died.
It's leverage. And leverage is the most valuable currency on Earth.
It is sitting in a vault somewhere right now, maybe in Israel, maybe on a private defense contractor server.
Being used today
Actively.
to control the exact people that we vote for and think are in charge.
It really reframes everything. You always hear that old phrase, who watches the watchman?
But the real question is, who has the tapes on the Watchmen?
Yeah, I think we are seeing the results of that answer play out on the news every single day.
Unquestionably. All right, we are going to leave it there for today. We know it is a very heavy topic to process, but understanding this supra-government structure is really the only way to make sense of the absolute chaos in global politics right now. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Keep questioning the narrative.
Always. We'll catch you on the next one.